Climate change and energy have become very topical issues. When I think of energy, supply and demand 20 years from now, I get very worried. In the last 3 years, the price of heating oil has doubled and the price of gas has gone up by 60%. If energy continues to rise at only 10% per year, then this €250 bill will become a €1,500 bill in 20 years' time. I just hope we can afford this. There are many people I know who have already turned their heating down considerably to keep their bills at bay. And I fear that in 20 years' time, there could be many of us wearing woolly hats. Ireland now imports 90% of its energy, and we're totally at the mercy of external forces and prices. It's time we took back some control of this vital issue and start to develop native energy sources. Wind is the obvious one for electricity, but what about the oldest way of keeping warm? Energy from wood. At 10%, our forest cover has come a long way since its virtual depletion 100 years ago, but still relatively small and not enough for the future. I'm off to Ballybuffet, a nice little market town in County Donegal, where I'm meeting John Jackson, a farmer who's enthusiastic about forestry. John is excited about FEPS, a new incentive that was announced just recently which promotes biodiversity in our forests and will allow more farmers to become involved in growing trees.
At present, there's 55,000 farmers in reps, and FEPS, Forestry Environmental Protection Scheme, gives them the opportunity to look at their land. There's about 1.7 million hectares of their land there, and they can look and decide if they want to go into forestry. There's an extra payment for them if they fulfil environmental guidelines, which works out at €200 per hectare per year on top of this 20-year forestry premium. They will be doing things in a far more environmentally sensitive, high biodiversity element to the scheme. They'll be looking after nature more, they'll be leaving more open space, and more broadleaves being planted. Also, the stone walls and the old hedgerows would have to be retained.
So in addition to the obligatory conditions, are there optional extras that you can do?
There's a suite of optional measures, about 20, you pick 6 of them. And it'll all depend on the site you're picking, and you will be able to design your forest for your own site with nature in mind and with biodiversity in mind. Some of them might be like gathering wood, dead wood, and leaving it in situ in the forest for the small invertebrates to feed on. You have bird boxes, bat boxes, badger runs. You have wet areas, leaving the wet areas and turn them into ponds for wildlife. You have bringing in more native trees, more buried trees for wildlife over the winter.
This plantation is now 12 years old and will soon be coming to a stage where John starts thinning.
The reason why we thin, we remove some of the crookeder ones. Somebody said to me yesterday, what you're doing is you're taking a few people away from around the table so that the people remaining at the table can put on more bulk and grow bigger.
Right,
and
okay.
That's why we thin our trees.
Right. So you start at about 15 years, and how often after that?
Usually it's every 5 years. With broadleaves, it can be longer in between.
So what do you do with the thinnings then when it's done?
The thinnings can be taken in, these are the thinnings here for ash, and you can use them for firewood.
These first thinnings are also the raw material for wood chips, an exciting new energy source for which there's a growing demand. To find out more about the potential of wood chips for energy, I'm off to meet Stephen Mahan from Teagasc. Stephen, is this first thinnings from the forest 15-year-old wood?
Yes, Duncan, it will be about 14 to 16 years of age, typical material from a first thinning. The more valuable materials, such as fencing stakes, have already been sold off to the sawmill, and what we're left with is normal, ordinary pulpwood that can be used as a wood fuel.
So what's the process? Once you get the thinnings now, what happens?
The most important thing is, and this is absolutely crucial in the whole story, is that it's properly dried. Then it will be chipped in the wood chipper, then it can be transported to the end user.
Now, Patsy McNulty here has got his machinery here on his farm, and he's chipping. Is the size now of his chipper, is that a practical size?
It's perfect. Every farmer in the country has a tractor. It's a mobile chipper. That machine will be able to do something like up to 8 inches of a diameter, which is fine because that's the small diameter stuff that will be coming out of first thinnings. and Patsy has developed a lovely alternative farm enterprise delivering wood energy services to local hotels, local homes and so on.
Wood chips are also produced on a larger scale. Near Petticoat, Greenbelt are chipping the wood that will be delivered to the Abbey Vocational School in Donegal town for their heating. This school is in the process of changing over from heating the school with oil to a heating system run on wood chip.
First of all, we were spending a lot of money on oil. You know, we use 43,000 litres of oil in the school. It's a large school, nearly 1,000 students. So it makes good economic sense. Immediately, our fuel bills will drop by 20%. When the boiler payoff period is over, in other words, the end of the first contract, we'll drop to way below 50% of the present cost of oil. Greenbelt, through their subsidiary Imperative Energy, they take all the risks really, because they install the boiler, they run the boiler, they are responsible for fuel supply, and the school signs a contract with them for heat supply, metered heat over a given period. The fuel is of course coming from local forests, so it's helping both enterprise and employment locally. Then of course environmentally we're saving at least 90 tonne of carbon emissions. So the footprint of the school, if you like, the carbon footprint of the school is going to be much improved as a result of this.
Hotels consume a large amount of energy and have been at the forefront in the changeover to wood fuels. Jackson's Hotel in Ballybuffet is one of them, and they will replace 117,000 litres of oil with wood chip, thereby reducing their annual carbon emissions by more than 300 tonnes. As oil gets more expensive, the demand for wood chip is also going to rise.
We know we have land there that's not producing a lot, and it is ideally suitable for forestry. Should we be planting it? I believe we should. Should we be aiming at 17% forest cover in this country? I think we should be aiming far above it.
Hopefully, in 20 years' time, we can continue to afford feeling warm and cosy. But it takes time to grow this renewable native resource, and it has to be planted now if it is to keep us warm for the future. Recent advances in technology have given us sensors that have resulted in everything from smartphones to smart fridges. The research that has driven these technologies has now given us the opportunity to monitor our environment in ways we never thought possible. I went to see how we might be feeding back information from the world around us in the very near future. Brian, with all the pressure on the environment today, and it's getting so complex, how important is research?
Well, environmental research is very important. It plays a key role in terms of providing information, assistance, tools and techniques to protect our environment.
Is monitoring very important in this?
We've got one project in the Tyndall Institute in Cork, which is looking at monitoring of waterways, developing smart sensors which will give us information about the quality of our waterways and be able to relay it in real time to a portal in the EPA Office. We cover 460 projects or thereabouts in a wide variety of areas, from small desk studies to large multidisciplinary studies in areas such as climate change, water quality, environmental health, and so on.
These studies are giving us a clearer picture of how we're affecting the world around us and the tools to help us to reduce our environmental impact. I paid a visit to the Tyndall Institute to see an ongoing project for myself. Brendan, what goes on here in the Tyndall Institute?
Well, at the Tyndall National Institute, we're developing the next generation microelectronic systems. We're carrying out research in the development of silicon integrated circuits, like you see in this lab around you, all the way down to the development of wireless sensor systems for embedding in everyday objects.
So what are you researching at the moment?
My particular area of interest is in the area of wireless sensor systems, where we're integrating sensors with microprocessors and power supplies so that we can monitor data in real time.
These sensors are very small. What can they detect at this size?
It really depends on the sensors that you incorporate into the system. You can monitor a wide variety of pollutants such as phosphates, nitrates, dissolved oxygen, pH levels, etc.
The phosphate system which we're developing is a system that can operate on its own. It has wireless communications, it has a modem, it operates with a solar panel, and so it can be placed in a water environment for a long period of time, up to a year. If we want to monitor a lake, for example, we could have sensors at the inlet or the outlet of the lake, giving us an indication of the quality of the water in that lake, or similarly in the river or in an estuary or the sea. We would envisage these sensors giving us information about changes in water quality. And so if there's a problematic river or lake, we can put these sensors in there to determine where the source of that problem might be. The idea behind the project is that we can actually get information from day to day and have that information sent back wirelessly to the user so that they can access it at their desk in their office, and so observe changes within the water quality day by day.
So with all of this information coming online, are we going to be bombarded with information?
I suppose, Duncan, you might think that we are, but with improvements in browser technology, we can actually select the information that we need. What we're hoping to achieve is gaining information that can be distributed across the World Wide Web, can provide information, for example, for geographical information systems. So layering our information with information from the Environmental Protection Agency, by the Meteorological Service, so you're gaining information that's available through the internet.
Research projects like this are vital in bridging the gaps in our knowledge and will eventually mean that information is freely available on the World Wide Web. One day soon, we may be able to see the consequences of our daily activities in real time, allowing us to be much more proactive in protecting our environment. Bottled, sparkling, or straight from the tap, being seen with water has become the must-have accessory for the health-conscious.
Do you drink bottled water?
I do.
And how often would you buy bottled water?
I'd say probably once every 2 days.
Well, I find that I wouldn't be bothered just since I'm a student paying for the bottled water, but what I do is maybe filter it or boil it sometimes just to make sure that it gets it a bit cleaner than it would be normally, and hopefully take out any of the extra additives that might be caught.
Do you know where our water comes from?
A reservoir? Reservoir.
Yeah, reservoir. I don't know. I don't know, yeah. Is that water bottle from home, or did you buy that today?
Yeah, it is. I bought it yesterday.
And would you reuse them?
Yeah.
Like if I avoid the tap water, I don't get the bugs that go around. If I drink the tap water, I usually find that I end up with some weird stomach thing.
There are some popular misconceptions about the quality of tap water here in Ireland, but 80% comes from well-managed public supplies. The remaining 20% are in group and private schemes, now being targeted for improvement. How important is the quality of our drinking water?
Drinking water is extremely important. Clean drinking water has made a bigger difference to human health throughout history than any other individual public health intervention. So the provision of clean water is extremely important. It prevents disease, and of course it nourishes us.
In Ireland, about 80% of us are drinking from public water supplies. Is that water good?
The public water supplies in Ireland are amongst the best in the world. Particularly the city supplies and the major population supplies, Dublin, Limerick, Galway, Cork, and that's been shown time and time again.
Once you're off the main supply, that's where most problems can start. A lack of regular testing and essential maintenance can lead to an unexpected drop in standards.
We find that as the number of people supplied by the actual water scheme gets smaller and smaller, there's a rising incidence of human disease associated with water. For example, diseases like E. coli, VTEC, or cryptosporidiosis. You are more likely to see outbreaks of disease associated with those smaller water supplies. That said, you're still very unlikely to see them because we don't see that many outbreaks, but we do see every year 5-10 outbreaks of waterborne disease that can lead to hundreds of cases of human illness. Whenever you're drawing your water, say from a private well, that well can be contaminated by farmyard runoff, it can be contaminated by dirty water from fields, it can be contaminated by waste from a number of sources. And if the water isn't treated, if it isn't chlorinated, if it isn't filtered, then any microorganisms that are in that water can get into your glass and into you.
You mentioned E. coli. What is that and how does it affect us?
E. coli is a bacterium, a bug that's found in the gastrointestinal tract, the bowels of all animals, human beings included. There are certain varieties, however, that can cause quite serious human illness. VTEC is one variety of these, and it produces a toxin that can lead to quite severe illness, diarrhea, and in some cases renal kidney failure. Water can be tested. In general, the testing is carried out, can be carried out by the local Department of Environmental Health. More and more of the group water schemes are being managed now by the local authorities who look after the larger water schemes. So in a sense, the news is good. Clean, pure water is making its way more deeply throughout the country, but I think we've still a way to go yet.
With access to good water on tap, we still drink over 160 million litres of bottled water each year, which seems incredible when you consider the amount of plastic being used and the added costs of transportation. We've got a number of different bottled waters here. People pay more than they pay for petrol for bottled water. We import bottled water from France. You know, is that at a similar quality to, say, our drinking water, or is it better than our drinking water?
I think in general the bottled water we see in Ireland is of a very good quality. But if you compare it, say, to the water that we have here in Dublin or in Cork, as I say, this is amongst the best water in the world. So I certainly wouldn't drink bottled water in preference to the municipal water here. I think it's perfectly safe.
Even though it's rare, over the last few years we've seen outbreaks of Cryptosporidium, a waterborne parasite. I talked to Darragh Page about how dangerous the bug can be and what problems it causes for the authorities responsible for our water supply.
Well, Cryptosporidium is a microscopic parasite that can be present in water supplies, and it can cause illnesses like gastroenteritis, stomach upset, nausea, fever, and it can be very serious, causing symptoms for up to 2 weeks, and it can, in rare cases, be fatal.
Right. So where's the cause of this?
It originates from human or animal waste, so it can get into a water supply from sewage getting into the source of the water supply, or from animal waste getting in from land spreading, for example, if slurry too close to the water source.
Right, so how do you tackle it?
Well, the most important thing in tackling the problem is to address source protection and to protect the source of water that you have, to make sure that sewage isn't getting into the water supply upstream of the intake, or to make sure that there's no slurry getting into the water and that land spreading isn't occurring too close to the source of the water. Once the source has been protected adequately, the next stage to look at is the treatment at the treatment plant, and to make sure that you have all the appropriate stages of treatment operating at their optimum capacity at the treatment plant to remove the Cryptosporidium oocysts if they get into the water supply. And the final stage is to monitor the water supply to make sure that there is no Cryptosporidium getting through the treatment processes.
So what's the cost of dealing with this?
The cost is that a lot of treatment plants will need to look at the treatment processes that they have and assess whether there is a need to upgrade or to install additional monitoring equipment to be able to detect indicators of Cryptosporidium getting through the water supply, like turbidity and other measures, to see if they can reduce the risk.
So how would you know you've got it at home?
Well, one of the first things you should look at is to see whether there's any problems with your water supply. So, for example, if your water supply is coloured or there's been a change in the quality of the water coming in at the tap, it's unlikely that Cryptosporidium is going to be the cause of the problem, but it may be one of the things that you need to look at. So the first thing you should do is, if you notice a change in your water quality, is to contact the local authority and ask them if there are any problems with the water supply, and to make them aware of the fact that there has been a deterioration in the quality of the water.
The two most important things that can be done to protect our drinking water are to filter it and to chlorinate it. Filtering will remove the organic material, the rubbish in water that we don't need to be drinking. We add chlorine to it, which will get rid of pathogens like VTEC, the bacteria. And if the water has too much organic material, if it looks too brown, then the chlorine can't work properly. The filtration is also important because chlorine doesn't get rid of or deal with cryptosporidiosis. They've got a shell on them that protects them from chlorine. They need to be filtered out. So filtration is extremely important, and just as important as chlorination.
If you're worried about your private water supply, you can have it tested in a local laboratory, but do check beforehand exactly what they can test for. If you have concerns in general about your mains water quality, talk to your county council, and if you feel you have symptoms, do contact your doctor. In 2007, we're the richest we've ever been. We've over 2 million people at work and 250,000 employed in the industrial sector. more often than not, industry can be good for the community. It provides jobs. It can develop the economy of an area and can help build up the infrastructure of a whole region. But there's a balance to be struck, and when industry is allowed to win over the environment, when industry isn't managed or regulated properly, it can have devastating effects on a community and the environment. In the past, we saw examples of unregulated industry taking its toll on the environment with oil spills, water pollution, dangerous emissions, as well as noise and odour pollution. Because of that past, industries today that have the potential to cause environmental damage are required to get an environmental licence and involve the public. When one of these industries moves into a new area, it must gain its environmental licence through a process that's very similar to getting planning permission for a building. For us to get involved at this early stage, it's not as hard as you think. I spoke to Paddy Nolan. Paddy, when an industry applies for a licence through the EPA, how can the public participate in that process?
Well, there are a number of stages in the process that the public can participate. The first one is when the developer decides and notifies the local community that he's going to develop the industry at the local facility. They should engage with the developer at that point in time, even before they come to the agency. Once they become involved with the agency, it goes through a regulatory process. And it's at that stage that the agency informs the local community. But the most important thing too is that they know the local environment. The agency doesn't. The agency has not been living there for years. They're the ones who are living there, but they're the ones who will have to live with this industry for many years to come. So it's important that they find out about the industry and they play their active role in relation to making submissions, wherever it may be.
Are most people in that local community objecting to things or making submissions at least?
Yes, the people are making submissions. As a matter of fact, of the some odd licences that we've issued to date, we've had some 20,000 submissions, which shows you that there's very good participation by the public, but we would like to see more.
I wanted to know what rights the public actually have. I asked Kieran O'Brien what you can do if you feel you have a complaint to make.
A lot of our licences require the industry to become a good neighbour and to interact with the local community and allow the local community to understand what's happening on the site. As part of that, they are required to have a file on the site that is open to the public. So it's very transparent now, the monitoring and the interaction that we would have is also on the public file. So they can contact us if they have a particular issue with a site that's close to them, either causing noise or odour or any issue that they have concerns about, or they can contact the site directly.
So what sort of things go wrong?
You can get incidents on site, you can get spillages, you can get equipment breakdown causing odour or noise, or surface water contamination, or discharges into rivers causing problems.
So what can people do if they're concerned?
If there is an issue they want to complain about, they can complain directly to the site, or they can complain directly to us. All of our monitoring and all of the information about the activity is on the public file, and people can get in the information, either on the internet or through our public offices, and we can take up that complaint and determine what the corrective action is required. We also encourage the local community to make submissions to us and also to let us know if there's an issue, because we cannot be there at all sites at all times, and the local community are the people, the eyes on the ground, and they can give us that information. And we need that information to adequately control industry.
If you have any concern about industry that's licensed by the EPA or would like information about an industry application in your area, contact your local EPA office or log on to epa.ie. The earlier you get involved, the more say you'll have.